The two Republican presidential candidates will campaign across South Carolina this week ahead of the primary on Saturday. CBS News political correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns has been following Nikki Haley.
Trailing Donald Trump by more than 30 points in her home state, former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley is plowing on.
At the end of the day, we want to close that gap. We want to make sure that we continue to show that there's a purpose there.
In order to win the nomination, you have to win some states. What states do you think you can win?
We're playing all of them. You'll have, after South Carolina, you're going to have another 20 states vote. Only 3 states have voted. We don't anoint kings here.
To your supporters who want to see you get to the nomination, how exactly do you get there?
One state at a time. One state at a time. If I were to get out of the race now, it would be the longest general election in history. The political elite are saying you should get out. Why? Why should I get out? Do we not want states to vote? Let's let them vote.
A win in South Carolina on Saturday would give Trump his 4th state victory in a row. Facing that prospect, Haley is focusing her campaign speeches here on the former president's mounting legal challenges and his posture toward Russia.
I don't know why he keeps getting weak in the knees when it comes to Russia. But I'll tell you what, Russia's not getting weak in the knees.
Trump made his first comments about the death of Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny in a Truth Social post Monday, connecting it to his own legal woes, saying, "We are a nation in decline." Trump received a $355 million fine in a civil court case on Friday. And over the weekend, he tried to rally support at a sneaker convention in Philadelphia, where he unveiled a new line of shoes.
It's a slightly different audience than I'm used to, but I love this audience.
And with just 5 days to go until the South Carolina primary, both Republican candidates will be campaigning here in the same area. Donald Trump will be hosting a town hall, while Nikki Haley will be delivering a speech on the state of her campaign, defying calls for her to drop out. John?
Caitlin Huey-Burns in Columbia, South Carolina. Thank you. For more, let's bring in CBS News Chief Washington correspondent Major Garrett. Major, it's good to be with you again. What do you make of the response from the former president to the death of opposition leader Alexei Navalny, his death?
Well, it certainly took a long while for something to be said by the former president about this world-shattering event. And Alexei Navalny's death is that. Protests all over the world because people understand what Alexei Navalny represented within Russia and globally. That is to say, someone who was a courageous opposition figure, poisoned once, returned to Russia knowing, predicting to our colleagues at 60 Minutes that someday he would be killed by the Russian government if he went back to Russia to lead the opposition. That is precisely what happened. For 2 days or more, former President Trump had nothing to say about this global event. And when he did say something, he tried to make him be an Alexei Navalny figure, someone who's being roughed up by the government in charge. Probably for the very first time ever in this campaign, John, saying that President Biden is like Vladimir Putin. Of course, he often says Putin is smart, aggressive, a strong leader, words and phrases he never applies to the current sitting president of the United States. Trying to unravel that inconsistency is up to the former president and his supporters. But it is a long period of time for nothing to be said. And it also comes in the shadow, John, of what we talked about on this program last week. Remarks where the former president said Russia could do whatever the hell it wanted. Well, the Navalny death may very well fall into that category.
Nikki Haley has been talking about this response, and mentioning that Trump omitted anything about Putin's history of political suppression as a way to make the case that she would be better able to handle these kinds of global issues. Do you think that matters at all in the race that she is right now competing in?
John, it would matter more if there was a single other Republican not named Nikki Haley saying that they were too alarmed by former President Trump's rhetoric or lack of commentary about Navalny's death, but there really aren't. Nikki Haley is essentially by herself, trailing badly in South Carolina. And if she loses in South Carolina, as every single poll suggests, and probably loses handily, that'll be 4 losses in a row. No one has ever captured a major party nomination after losing 4 campaigns in a row. And the distance between Haley and Trump could get larger as Super Tuesday gets closer. What Nikki Haley needs is some Republicans saying, yes, We may not support you, but we are as alarmed as you are about this particular approach to this very important global issue that former President Trump is taking. She's finding scarce numbers of allies.
An extraordinary distance for a party to travel that once defined itself by supporting the smallest freedom fighter in the smallest country, trying to stand up as a single person even against Russia. Speaking of distance that the party has traveled, Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina was on 2 of the Sunday shows, including our Face the Nation, and refused to answer whether, if he were in Mike Pence's position, asked to certify the votes in 2020, whether he would have done so. He called it a hypothetical. Yes. What do you make of that with respect to what one can and cannot say in Donald Trump's Republican Party now?
Well, you cannot say, if you want to be in the Trump inner circle, and there are certainly indications that Senator Tim Scott would like to be considered to be former President Trump's running mate, should he secure the Republican Party nomination, you cannot say the election wasn't stolen, and you cannot say Mike Pence did the right thing. Former President Trump disagrees with both of those, even though constitutionally and as a matter of fact, law and verified numbers, both are true. The 2020 election was not stolen. Mike Pence did the constitutionally appropriate thing. But you can't say that in Trump's party if you want to be in the upper echelon. Clearly, Senator Scott would like to be considered in those ranks.